Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I made the bases for the Khainite Shadowstalkers for Warcry. Here's the base we're going to make, and in this video I'll make sure I go through all the tools, equipment and paint that I used too. And you can see here it's quite dark, but as soon as you add some light, that purple really comes through, and this will make a really nice base for our Khainite Shadowstalkers. Here's everything I used to make these bases, and you don't have to use these makes of paint and glues, but I prefer the Gorilla Glue, and I've got some wood glue, some super glue, and then here's all the different bits that I'm going to use. So I've got some budgie sands, some cut up card, some cut up plastic film, and then I've got some sprue pieces that I cut up to make all the bricks, and so I've got 5 different types, really fine, and then a bit bigger, and then building up to the bricks themselves. I also used some Citadel technical paint, the Martian Iron Earth, and then the paints I used for the whole thing after the Martian Iron Earth was put on was the Abaddon Black, Ceramite White, and then the contrast Shyish purple. Here's the card I use, just some regular card, I guess about as thick as a greeting card. And I got this cool sticker from Element Games with a Christmas order I put in, and there's some film on the back that I used. And then also some sprue. The sprue is going to be for the bricks, and the card and film will be for some kind of tile effect for the floor. I'll just run through all the different sizes I use. So these kind of bricks are modelled on the Warcry Catacombs set and some of the terrain that comes in it. So I've got some full bricks and some half bricks. Then I also got some and kind of cut them up into kind of flatter bricks as if they'd been sliced in half or maybe fell off a little bit of a statue or something. And then some jagged bricks that are a lot smaller with more pointy edges. And then finally all the trimmings I used as well, and they can be great as little bits that have chipped off. This is a great way to use up some sprues, and I think they make brilliant bricks, and it's really easy. Just cut them to size, and again I just use the Warcry Catacombs as a guide, and then I cut the brick into full bricks and half bricks, and then I used a file and the clippers here just to trim them up and give them some aging and weathering. And here we go. So I'm just like snipping off the corners where I imagine they would get maybe hit with a sword or an axe or some kind of weapon, or perhaps the whole bricks like crumbled, and it's the edges that are going to get damaged and get bits chipped off them. So I just took away little snips at a time and just kind of shaped it so it wasn't a perfect looking brick, because we want some damage and some age in there. So clipping it off has given us the most like effect there, but then I took a file and just went to work on some of those edges, filed them down a little bit, and I used the kind of side of the file, that little bit there, just to get in and give it some little grooves, and like some chunks have been chipped out of it, and this is all going to add to kind of break up the monotony of those shapes, those brick shapes, and just give it some character. And all these little touches we're doing by giving it more edges, more little dinks and areas for shadow, is also going to give us lots of places for some highlights to catch, and that's going to be really nice when we paint it up later on. But there we go, and I pretty much did that on all the bricks. Doesn't take too long. I did exactly the same on the smaller one. Again, a little bit fiddlier because you haven't got much to hold here, and I had to be careful because I was watching the camera and not my actual fingers, and I snipped a bit off. But yeah, so be careful of that. But it's pretty fiddly. But you know, it's not difficult. Just go at it, take your time, and try and make every brick different as well. I didn't put all the grooves in the same place, so just give it as much variety as you can. That's all going to come through later on when you paint it. And there we are. There's our half brick done, and that's all chipped away. And I also kept all these little scraps that came off, tiny bits, because that's all going to add to some rubble around the bricks, around the base. Each of the Khainite Shadowstalkers, they're all positioned differently with their feet. And so I just worked out how I wanted each base to be and made sure that it kind of suited the pose of the miniature and also gave enough room for me to glue it down. And I wanted to make sure the areas that I was going to glue the miniature to were flat and they would get the most contact possible so that the glue later on would really fix the miniature to the base. So I just go through a little dry run, just positioning those bricks where I want them, and then getting the little bits of card. I just cut those up with scissors, and I just want to give a bit of texture really. So with the crackle kind of paint that I'm going to be putting on, that's going to give a dusty, muddy texture. But these tiles are almost going to hint that there used to be a walkway or some kind of path, and it's just chipped away and worn away over time. And I just, I didn't want anything too high for these. I want them to be really coming out of the shadow, so this was a nice effect. So once I was happy with the layout for them all, I got some super glue and I just put a little dab on. And this Gorilla Glue is really great because it's not too runny. You've got lots of control with it and it really sticks quickly. And so I just put little blobs where I want those main bricks, and then I start applying the bricks and just pushing them down, a little tiny bit of pressure just to get them to catch. And then once I've got them all on there, I just use the end of a brush, the brush handle, just to push them down and make them stick as strong as possible. And here we go, I'm just grabbing the brush now. So just a little bit of pressure just to make sure it's fully bonded. And I'm not being really uniform with how I'm laying out the brick. I'm giving it some variety, making it all offset as if it's crumbled and come away from the main walls. So some of the smaller bits of plastic are a bit fiddly and want to escape. So I try with the brush and try and use the bristles, the damp bristles, to pick it up. But if not, just did my best with my fingers there. And again, a little bit more glue just to put that rubble around. So I kind of imagine the Khainite Shadowstalkers are going to be coming out the shadows near the walls, and those walls would have crumbled and left like rubble lying around. And that's my whole idea for these bases. I want them to be kind of in the shadows along the bases of the walls, where I think the miniatures are going to kind of hang out and where the fighters are going to be pouncing out from. So that glue sets really quick. So now I can move on to the Gorilla Wood Glue, and this is instead of PVA. You could definitely use PVA for this. It might even be better, but I've got this wood glue and it sets faster. So for making the videos, I find it better, and I just like the texture of it. I just get a cocktail stick and then I'm spreading it around where I want the budgie sand to go on later on, but also where I want to stick these tiles down. And I try and be a bit heavier with the glue where it's nearer the bigger chunks of brick and rubble, because I want more sand to build up there. Again, that wall's going to crumble, it's going to chip away into smaller bricks. Those smaller bricks are going to chip away into like tiny bits of like stone and gravel, and also the mortar perhaps is going to crumble. So I want to give that effect with the budgie sand. And now I'm just going to start placing the floor tiles, and these are going to be with that cardboard and with the kind of film that came in the back of that sticker. I'm just using a wet brush, and that should help me pick up any of these little ones. They're not too heavy, so, and it starts working good at the beginning, so that was cool. And I'm just placing it around. Again, I don't want a uniform path. I want it to be like a crumbled path that's broken up over time, and so I'm just putting on all haphazard, leaving gaps in between each one because we want to represent that they were once floor tiles with some kind of grouted in there. And then I'm also going to make sure that some of that wood glue is going over the top of it, so we can build up some of the sand and gravel later on. Now I'm taking the cocktail stick and I'm just taking some of that wood glue and going over the top of some of the stones completely. And I made a mistake making these bases. I should have covered the plastic film completely with this wood glue, because the plastic film didn't take the paint later on, and so I had to go over it with a mix of PVA and paint. So if you use anything like this plastic film, just give it a coat of PVA or wood glue before you paint it and let it dry thoroughly. But it's no problem later on. I just added some more PVA and paint. So I put all that glue on, and now I'm sprinkling this budgie sand, and I'm completely covering it, all the areas, and then anywhere there's glue, that budgie sand is going to stick to, and where I put the glue the heaviest, it's going to build up there. And this wood glue is great because it doesn't foam. If I'd use super glue across the whole base, it kind of foams up amongst the sand, and it gives a different effect. And it's a cool effect, like if you want it for a desert, maybe a desert look, but for something like this, I really wanted to just see the sand. I didn't want to see that foaming, like bulging glue underneath. And so they are, it's a really fine effect. And I just made sure it went up the sides of some of those bricks too, and also a little bit on the top, because we don't want it dead clean and dead flat. We want some texture there as well. So you really don't need to use this Martian iron earth, but I've just bought it and I really wanted to try it out. So with an old scruffy brush, I'm just going to apply it to all the areas where there's no sand or any of those paper or plastic tiles. I'm just going to put it all over it, and I'm going to go over some of the edges where the different textures are. So I'm going to go over just gently some of the tiles, like in the corners and just over a little bit of the bricks maybe, and that's just going to give us a little bit extra texture. But it's also going to blend the whole base together, so all the different textures are going to look like they flow, and it's going to look like they kind of belong together. So I've been watching videos online about these different crackle paints, and the idea is that you leave it quite thick if you want the cracks or the bits of earth to be bigger, or thin if you just want a very fine crackle effect. And so I kind of did a mix of both. If there was an area that just had the black base underneath, I put quite a lot on, left it quite thick. And if there was areas where it overlapped with the different textures, then I went a little bit thinner. And I was really happy with how it came out. I think this would look great if you wanted to do a complete base with it, and I probably will for some of the miniatures in the future. But here we go, you can have a look now and see all the different textures together, and I hope you can see from this the different thicknesses of that iron earth paint. It's like a gloopy thick paint, so you can really put it on, it doesn't run or spread out. So now I'm moving on to some of the Citadel skulls. This is a great box. I did a video of this a while back when I first started the channel, so if you want to check that out in detail you can see what you get. But you get tons of skulls. And for this I'm just going to pick out one that I think will suit the base, and I just went for this one here. Chose this one without a jaw just because it's not too big and it's not going to stand out too much. This whole thing is going to be covered in one colour, so we don't need the detail too much. And here I'm just scraping away that mould line and where the sprue was attached to it with a blade. And then again, taking that Gorilla super glue, I'm just going to put a little blob where I want it to go. And this is pretty much drying now. The area I'm putting on is completely dry. So just putting a little bit of glue there. I'm taking my Uncle Bill's tweezers. These are really great. I love these. And just going to pick it up and then place it where I want it to go. And then just push it in and hold it firmly for a couple of seconds. And that takes really quickly. Looking back, I should have put this on before I did the sand. It would have blended it in a little bit better. But I just forgot about the skulls, to be honest. But it worked okay. And luckily, for this effect with the kind of rubble and everything, it kind of makes sense. It just fell there. And now we're all completely dry. And you can see that paint has really crackled and given us a nice effect. We've got some different texture going on. Some different heights. But the whole base itself isn't too high. And it's going to work really well. And here's all of them. So I did these as a batch rather than doing one at a time. Did them all at the same time. And you can see here, this big one, that's got a lot more of the tiles on. But I tried to mix them all up and give a bit of variety. Okay, now I'm going to paint them. Once they're all completely dry, I took some Abaddon Black. I just took an old brush for this and I wet that paint down with some water just to thin it out. So I'd make sure it would go in all those cracks and crevices. And I just gave it one complete coat of black all over it. And this is a really simple paint technique. We're just going to cover it in black and then give it a dry brush of white and then give it a shade with the contrast paint with the purple. But you can see here where I made that mistake with the film, the paint just isn't taking. And so after I've given it a complete coat, I just mix a little bit of PVA with black and I just go over those areas where you can see the plastic film coming through. And then after that, you can just paint anything you like on it after the PVA. I mean, on the other ones I made for the Signs of the Flame, I put a complete coat of PVA and water over the whole base before I painted it after the first coat. And you could do that here. You could give it a black coat and then a coat of PVA once that's dry. And then it's going to be really strong. But I didn't bother. The glues I've used are so strong. And there we go. There's all our bases painted black now. And you can see from this one that we've been doing throughout the video, that's one solid colour of black now. And I kind of want everything to blend in as much as possible, so as if they're in the shadows, but I still want some details and I want to catch some areas with a very fine highlight, but I don't want it to stand out at all. And you can see again those areas there where I painted the PVA, they're a little bit shinier when they set, but it's no problem. And here on this bigger base there's still a little bit sticking out on the base, so I've just trimmed that away, and you could use a little blade or a file to smooth that down, but that did the trick, just a quick clip. Now we're on to the highlight stage, and I took some Ceramite White, and this is a base by Citadel, but you could use any white paint for this, any white like Vallejo or Citadel paint, and I just got some on a brush, and this is a makeup brush by Very Vegan, and this is really cool. Once I got these, my dry brushing went up a level. So much better than using like a normal paintbrush. These makeup brushes are great. And so I'm loading the brush up, getting it right in all the bristles. I'm using a bit of card just to work it off, and then also some kitchen towel just to like get most of that paint away. And I just try it out on my hand to make sure there's not too much paint, and then keep going, repeating that process till I'm happy, and then just start applying it all to the raised areas. I'm going quite lightly at first just to make sure there's not too much paint, and trying to catch the lines and the sharp edges, and that's where we want the most of the highlight. Once we put the Shyish purple contrast paint on this, it's really dark and you're hardly going to see these highlights, but I want a really subtle effect, so it was important to get some highlights there, but it's certainly not going to be strong, not for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. I wanted to keep with that narrative, imagining them in the shadows, and this kind of base is going to blend in with their cloaks as well, so I think it's going to look cool once it's done. But here we go, I keep going all over those bits and really paying attention to the raised areas. I gave a little bit more pressure on the skull, so that was covered in almost white really, with just the recesses being black. And then once I'd given it all a kind of dry brush, I went round the edge to imagine it like a frame, and just a bit more pressure again just to give a nice circle around it. And once we put that wash on later, you're not really going to see this, but once we shine some light on it, it'll stand out a little bit. And there we go, that's it, that's all highlighted, and that's the 2 paint stages done. And now we can move on to the 3rd stage, and here it is all dry, close up, and you can see it's really bringing all that budgie sand is really coming through. Right, now we've got our contrast Shyish purple, and there's nothing fancy here, we're just going to apply it all over the model with a scruffy brush again, and I'm just putting an even coat all over it, making sure it really goes into the crevices and in between those bricks and under the skull. And I'm not being too careful to wipe the paint away from the flatter, smoother areas here, because I really just want it all to blend in as if it's in a really heavy kind of magical shadow. So I'm giving it a complete coat, and it's going to be quite like dark. I think this wouldn't really work with many other miniatures, but I think for the narrative of the Khainite Shadowstalkers, I really like the idea. But if you wanted to go with like something that matched the catacombs more, you could colour the bricks in the same way that I painted the bricks of the terrain, and then do the floor a different colour and the skull a different colour, and that'd work really well, I think. And now that's all dried, and you can see when the light hits it, you certainly get a lot more of the purple colour coming through, but it's really dark, just as I wanted it, so I was really happy. And now just going to finish by painting the rim. So I take some white tack and I stick it underneath, and then I take my brush, this is the big makeup brush, it's got a wide handle, and I push that in, and then I can hold it up and I can give a nice coat of paint around the edge now. So that's the next stage, and for that I'm going to take some Abaddon Black again, and then I'm just going to use that straight out the pot. And I'm just going to put a nice thick coat all around the edge there. And again, you could wet it down a bit and maybe do 2 coats if you prefer, but I've just gone for 1, and hopefully that's enough. But I think at the end it leaves it nice and bold. I think if over time maybe 2 coats would be better, maybe it'll wear away. I'll find out, I guess, but for me I just did 1 coat and I was happy with that. And that's it, all done. So I'll take some photos now, and we'll have a closer look at it when it's completely dried, and then you can see what the end result looks like. And there we go, I shined a light directly on this when I took the photo, and that really brought out the purple, and I think this colour is going to work really well with the Khainite Shadowstalkers and their cloaks. Here's one of them based up and ready to go, and I'll put links in the description to all the paints I use and all the different products, so you can pick those up too. There'll be affiliate links, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. In fact, it could save you up to 20% with Element Games. And for every sale made through the affiliate links, I get a small commission, and I can use that to develop the channel. And I really appreciate that support. I hope this video has been helpful to you. And if you want to see how to fix the miniatures to the bases, if you paint and build them separately like I have, then I've done another video for that, and I'll put a link in the description there. I've also done a separate video for the bases for the Scions of the Flame. So if you picked up the Warcry Catacombs box, you can do the bases like this if you wanted to for both warbands. So thanks so much for watching. Again, I really hope this helped you out. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, And don't forget to hit that notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.